Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea, in particular a very spectacular episode, as tonight we're going to be counting down our favourite, how should we put this game, spooky moments, scary moments?
Scariest moments in film for us, like.
Yep. Tonight we're going to be running down a list of myself and Kim have compiled of our favourite scariest moments in horror cinema. I don't know about yourself, Kim, but when it came to compiling my list, I tried to avoid like a lot of the obvious ones that always appear on everyone's list, like Ben Gardner's head in Jaws, for example. Which, while it's still a fantastic jump scare, which gets me every single time, it's not going to make my list. It's like I wanted to, like, whenever I'm given a chance to do lists or drafts, I just always like to highlight the things that people tend to overlook. So hopefully we're going to achieve that with this list as well. But that's why my picks may be a little left field. I know Kim went her own way with her list. So do you want to start us off tonight then, Kim?
Sure. I mean, I am going to start off with 2006 Pulse. And it's a very specific scene where it's like the bathroom scene. And a lot of it has to do with like a really cool camera pan where you have a girl in the bathroom stall, and then she starts hearing something outside, and then the camera pans out, and then it's like there's no one there, and then kind of thing, and then there's like, and then you kind of see that little ghost figure type of thing, and then it pans back to her, and then she looks out, and then, you know, it's like, it's a very like scene where she's looking in the bathroom mirror, and then she sees the stall behind her, and that sort of general scene where it's just because of all the camera pans and all the atmosphere that's been built at that point. Like, I know that a lot of people, like, Pulse in general is rated really badly, but like the remake itself is rated really badly, and a lot of people probably could find a much better scary scene in its original, which I do agree, but I also don't remember that very well. But Pulse in this case, I think it's one of, I think in this case it makes the list because it was one of the first horror movies that I watched, and that scene really stuck to me from then till now, sort of thing.
Fantastic. Pulse is one of those movies that I keep saying I'm going to watch, both this version and the original version, and I've so far failed to happen on both. Pulse did obviously make Shudder's list of 101 most shocking moments as well, so maybe we're going to see a revival of interest in Pulse.
Maybe. I think it's worth a rewatch because I find it unjust in the sense that, you know, obviously the reason why I sought out the original was because, I mean, when you look at a lot of ratings for it, both its original and the remake have really low ratings. And to me, that's very weird because if the original was a low rating, then why was it made into a remake? You know, like, why would there be a remake for it? And I don't know, maybe there's a cult following of some sort. I don't know. I'd have to go into deeper research, but it's been a film that I personally like. Like, don't watch any of the Pulse sequels, but they're truly bad. But like, I think this one has something in there.
For my first pick, I'm going to go with another film which never seems to get its due, and that's Creep from 2004, directed by Christopher Smith, in which a woman's trapped in the London subway system and finds herself pursued by an unknown attacker who turns out to be a mutant man who is part of a secret experiment that's been happening under the streets of London, and he was one of these children that was left behind and has been basically hiding out in the London subway system. This isn't actually the first time that something horrible has been found in the London subway system, as you've also got Death Rail, which featured cannibals hiding in the London Underground. And with Creep, it's got one of the scenes which is still a scene which I'm still traumatized by now, in which one of the characters is left as the others in the group assume that she's been dead, and this mutant man turns up and proceeds to perform surgery on her, but he's got a kind of a child mentality, so he's basically reenacting these surgery sequences he's seen, and it's absolutely a grotesque ending with a surgical blade being put in a rather uncomfortable place. But this is just such a creepy and disgusting and just traumatizing sequence, and just the way that it lingers on this particular scene just really meant it stick with you. Creep, thankfully, is going to be heading to the Arrow Player in October along with Severance, so hopefully it'll get a bit of a second life and more people will get to see it, because whenever you mention Creep, they'll assume it's that movie on Netflix, which it's not. But that's my first pick. What about yourself, Kim?
My next pick would be 2016's Lights Out. Which is the directorial debut for David F. Sandberg. And it's basically like talks about a young woman who's trying to confront her childhood fears, and they soon realize it's this spirit that's attached to their mother. That's the culprit behind the whole thing. And basically what Lights Out does is it's very cleverly uses the concept of like the light is where the creature, like the horror element is able to survive in. So the scene where I talk about is somewhere like that I really like, that I think is really creepy, is somewhere near like the final takedown moment. And it's where they're kind of lured into like they're in a dark house and the power's been taken out, and then they go into the attic, or not the attic, but like the basement to fix the power, and then they realize it's a coy. It's like a lure. So both the spirit is downstairs and it's kind of like morphing around. So you have like a really clever use between like how they're trying to keep the light, like a little source, a light source that they have. And the light source keeps changing because you have, like in the basement, it's very creepy where you see the light come in and out from their little like, I can't remember, it's a flashlight or something like that. And then, I don't know if the scene goes, I can't remember if my scene specifically, but in this scene, it actually like, there's a moment where they're outside as well. And then the car lights come into play and you have this moment there. And I think it's really clever in the sense like the use of the light really creates that creepy element, because at this point, you know how the whole creature functions. But at the same time, like there's a lot of things in there that the tension that it builds and like the darkness that it creates in that space. And not only is it like a claustrophobic space, but at the same time, you don't know when they're going to come out and which direction. And it's playing with the dark really well, but also using that light source to the advantage. So, I really like the structure of that whole scene to create that like creepy tension.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first sort of time I've seen this particular scene, because Lights Out came out around the same time as It Follows, another film which I've yet to see. But I really love the mechanic here of the fact that the ghost can't be seen if it loses its power if the lights go onto it. So it was sort of like, it's got the sort of usual setup where you think, the boyfriend's going to be dead, and then he uses the car headlights, as you said, and I thought it was just a really clever sequence, just how it uses the lights and the different ways that you can get light from car headlights or the mobile phone. I thought it was just a really great use of light and effect, and it's always fun when you've got like a monster that's like limited by something, so like vampires with sunshine, and this obviously being a ghost with light. So I think that was really cool, and I'm gonna go and check this one out because it looked really good.
Yeah, I'm glad. I hope you like it when you do, because there's I believe there's pretty mixed reviews on Lights Out itself. But what's your next pick?
My next pick is a creature feature that I believe we're both big fans of, and that's Alligator. Which is one of the better Jaws knockoffs. This one features a baby alligator that was flushed into the sewage system, and thanks to feasting on genetically modified animals that have been dumped by the local lab, it's turned into a ginormous crocodile, or alligator, should I say? Because it'd be weird if it's a crocodile in a movie called Alligator.
True.
Not that anyone ever knows the difference. Everyone said they read books and seen documentaries and know the difference. They never do.
I think that everybody who goes into a film, either about an alligator or a crocodile, and they don't know what it is, they will always look it up, because I always do.
So this particular scene is the setup is that the alligator has snuck into a residential pool and is hiding out, and these kids from the birthday party in the house are coming out and they're playing pirates and they're going to make the younger brother walk the plank. And Benone, the alligator's in the pool below, and the pool lights get switched on and the alligator's mouth is waiting up below, but the kids don't see him until they push the younger brother in, where he becomes alligator chow. This is it's horrific on so many levels, this scene. Not only do you have a small child being eaten by an alligator and being pushed in by his siblings, but the fact that you see the alligator like suddenly appear there and it's got its maw open, and it's kind of like the scene in Jaws where Brody's on top of the crow's nest and you can see the shark below him and he's trying to get his shot off. It's a real nice replication of that shot there. But while there's so many great moments in Alligator, such as like when it bursts up the city street or when it attacks the wedding, this one scene in particular just always sort of like stood out to me as just this really great moment of horror that makes you probably question what's in your swimming pool after you've seen it. So just when you thought it was safe to go back into your private pool, you got to think again. There may be an alligator in there now.
It doesn't help that this pool was very dirty.
It's full of leaves and
there were like
trash,
leaves and stuff there, right? So,
but it's
no. I mean, Alligator is a really great pick. I mean, when we get around to the next season and we start talking about creature features, this one does appear, and it's one of those films. I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of moments in Alligator which they create that horror moment really well, and I feel like creature features sometimes don't create that horror. Like you were talking about the wedding scene and all that, and those moments I put like more into like a silly moment. Yeah. It's not really like they're not really like meant to be too horrific because it's such a wide group and there's a bunch of crazy silly people doing stupid things, and then but when you have moments like this, it's like the horror is in not only the endangering children, but at the same time it really focuses on that that unknown, right? Like that there's an alligator in the pool because you're the audience and you can see it, the outline of it, and you can see the mouth opening, but the kids is like the kid walking the plank is like no, and he's blindfolded, he can't see anything, and by the time he drops in, it's already too late, right?
Oh, definitely so. And it's so rare to see children killed on film. Normally there's an escape for them, but there's certain films that will pull the trigger on it. Like you got Dark Waters, got an example, Mimic by Del Toro, features death by kids. The Blob remake features the death of a child as well. So when you got a film that's willing to pull the trigger on it, it's always a little more shocking because you always think the kid's going to get away, but when they don't. And especially in this sequence, and the way that this animatronic crocodile's lit up underwater, the thing looks real. Like the rest of the time, it's very lumbering and cumbersome, but they make it work. But in this scene, because of the way the pool lights come onto it, the way it's reflected, you would think this is like a real crocodile in this pool that they've got some real questionable health and safety, and they're putting this kid above it. But it's just It as I said, it's just a scene that like it's kind of shocking and comes out of nowhere because you think what this film's about, and then it throws that scene in there and just catches you by surprise, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's a real like tribute to the film itself, and like in saying that, because I mean the movie is like 1980 or something, right?
Yeah. So
back then it's all practical. And you don't really, like the alligator seeming real is such a big part of, honoring this film for what it is, I think. It's like you said, like most of the movies, the alligator is just kind of like strutting around slowly.
Yeah, it's a lot of actors like hyperactively acting around it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like when you look at the guy from Wolf Creek who's in Dark Age, and he said this thing was so slow. It's sort of like I'm here like wrapping around its thing, and I'm trying to make it look like it's a dangerous crocodile, but it really isn't at all. So, but I think the alligator's sort of like one of the standouts. The sequel is awful, so do not waste your time on that. Alligator to the Mutation, but I think it would take us, dare I say, until Crawl or Rogue actually, before we got another great scary gator movie.
Yeah, because I mean, even if you think about Lake Placid, which is before.
Oh yeah, but it's more comedic, isn't it?
That's still, yeah, that's still decent, I would say. That's still a decent gator movie. And then yes, it would be Rogue after that, I would think. Yeah.
Because Lake Placid is 99, greatest movie year ever. Also, no, it was 2001 because it's the same year as Deep Blue Sea.
Yes.
So I'm going to shut up now. Kim, what was your next pick?
Coincidentally, mine is also one which is about children who die in horror movies. So mine is going to be 2018's psychological horror Hereditary, which I think is also a directorial debut by Ari Aster. And I think at this point a lot of people know what Hereditary is, but it's like, basically, if you don't know, the movie is about like members of the family that are haunted by this presence in their home, basically. And what happens is, like the scene that I'm talking about is where you have the daughter's death scene. And what really happens is she's having this allergic reaction in the back of the car, and her brother is driving her frantically home. Was it?
Yeah.
And driving her frantically home, and she's just like turning and like she's choking. She can't breathe in the back seat. And at one point she suddenly feels the need for air, so she pops her head out of the window. And at that point, you have that moment where I think he loses control because there's something like an animal that crosses the street, and the car swerves to avoid, and then her head hits a lamppost and her head flies off. And she dies, basically. So, yeah, that scene from that moment till, like, the moment when they go home and, like, the parents learn about it, right? It's, like, a scene that is incredibly scary and sad and shocking, I think. But that scene is probably one of the most powerful, surprisingly horrific scenes in the entire movie. And I mean, I believe a lot of people regard Hereditary with a lot of, like they get scared by a lot of the moments there, a lot of the bigger moments that are more traditionally horror film, like supernatural horror. But this one, I think, was powerful because you never expected her, who seemed like, because the daughter felt like a pretty key character in the story. You didn't expect her to, not only was it they made a child die, but like it felt like it was one of the key characters that died also.
Yeah, I mean, Hereditary obviously being a real key piece of A24's filmography, really. I mean, with Hereditary, I think it's sort of like announced that A24 were going to be the artsy counter to Blumhouse, which I think is really interesting, the fact that we now have two sort of like powerhouses when it comes to horror. If you want something arty, you go to A24, and if you want to make something a little lighter, a little more disposable, then you go and hang out at Blumhouse. And I think both studios have got their strengths, and they both produced interesting works. And while Hereditary it wasn't as effective a movie for myself as it seemed to be for a lot of people, this scene with the death of Charlie is definitely a real sort of standout moment. I remember like getting that real big jolt when I saw it. And there's so much that comes after the scene of her death that just feels very sort of true to life. The fact that he goes home and he goes to bed, and it's that very sort of like thing that if you've ever messed up something so badly and you just go home and you just want to go to bed, you just want to shut everything off, and this numbness that you see him there. And then we see with Toni Collette's mother character, the primordial screaming that she has, this they're struggling to deal with the death of her daughter, and it's just so raw and intense. And added to this, the fact that since having kids, I can't deal with kids in peril, kids being harmed. It just goes right through me and infects me on just like this horrible deep level that I just don't really like. So you got this to look forward to, Kim. Maybe it's not already hitting home, but the fact that the payoff for this end sequence is her decapitated head in brilliant daylight crawling with ants, and it's like, oh great.
Yes.
But fantastic scene in otherwise forgettable movie for myself, at least anyway. So, but I did like the follow-up, Midsommar. I thought that was really good. So
something to look forward to, definitely. So what's your next pick?
Okay, my next pick is from Alien, as in the first one, and that's the vent sequence where the ship's captain Dallas has gone into the ship's vents to try and flush out the alien xenomorph that is now running amok. Now, when obviously we talk about Alien, there's a number of big standout moments when it comes to shocks, such as like the chest burster sequence, the face hugger appearing out of the egg. There's many sequences with the alien itself, but the vent sequence, I feel, it was always like this really intense moment. It's this really sort of prolonged terror, and the fact that you've got this beeping of the monitor constantly that where they're tracking the alien and they're tracking his progress, and they're talking to him constantly back and forth, and he can't see where this alien is, but he knows it's sort of descending upon him. And it really sort of set a reoccurring theme within the Alien franchise movies, where they're always in vents. They love to get into air vents at any possible moment. We see it in, there's a chase sequence in Aliens. We get to see them trying to flush an alien out the vents in Alien 3. So whatever it was about this vent sequence, they love to replicate it. And even if you play the game Alien Isolation, there's more vents scenes for you there as well. But I just always really loved this sequence as a kid, and just the fact that when it ends, we get to see the alien full on, and it like cuts, and it's like almost like the broadcast itself has been cut. And I was just thought that was like such a great way it's method, the way that the crew all sort of like reacting, and they're going more panicked, the way it's closing in, and the fact it's been reworked in pop culture as well. The Simpsons did a play on this with groundskeeper Willie trying to get Santa's little helper out of the school vents. And you had like Skinner looking on the monitor, same as this. So it's a scene that could have gone either way. It could have been really blasé, but in this one, it's just really sort of tense, and you're just sort of like the way that you're just like this crampedness of the vents, and how it's just also like dark, the only illuminations from the torch and stuff. I just think it's a really perfect moment in an already perfect movie. So
yeah, I mean, Alien is one of those movies where there's always that constant debate between Alien and Aliens and which is better, and obviously Aliens is more of like an action movie.
Yeah, it's in my opinion Vietnam in space, isn't it?
Yeah, but if you talk about it in like the horror groundedness of it, like Alien is very, very like, I find it creates horror very, very well. Yeah. Right from the moment that you have you have the chest burster scene till you go forward. But I mean, the vents are such a key element. I think that's inspired so much horror nowadays, in games and movies, and using that kind of claustrophobic space and that sort of like limited light and that sort of thing. I mean, I've already talked about before one of my scenes, like low lighting is always a really great tension builder. And this one, you also have the pressure of the things coming, the tracker that's going off at the same time, and all these things, it creates both like a perfect atmosphere of like noise and like mild sound to the conversation and the the unknown that's going to be coming towards you type of thing. And I think that's one of those, the balance between how that scene is crafted is so well done in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, with Alien, it never gave us like a cheat like we have with Jaws, where with the music's intensity sort of indicates where the shark is.
Yeah.
With Alien, it's always like beeps and heartbeats, and these like very sort of organic things that were used to sort of like build the tension. There's no like when you like moved on to like Aliens, there's more sort of like the soundtrack came more to the forefront there, especially during those big action sequences. And with Alien, I mean, it was essentially just the haunted house in space. That was like really just the concept here, and I think it just perfectly plays up. I mean, the confinement of this sort of space, and just like you think of like moving through this sort of like area where if something's behind you, you can only go so quickly. It could be in front of you, and then you got to try and turn around, which is no be fun. So, and to also kill off a character you thought was so key. I mean, he's the ship's captain, Dallas is, and yet he's the scene that plays before this, where he's sort of like asking about his own chances of survival, and it's sort of like, oh, the minimal, and so he like takes it upon himself to like that he's going to be the one to go in the vents and flush this alien out. So. But yeah, I'm a huge. I think we've already established, like, if you go back to Alien 3, you can hear me fanboy over my love for this franchise. So, yeah, Alien. I know everyone goes off to Aliens because it's got more action pieces, but Alien is still a stone cold classic, whichever way you want to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you on that part. Like, I mean, I personally, like, on a entertainment level, like a movie that I'd go back to watch all the time, I definitely choose Aliens. But if it were talking about like just the craft of a horror movie and like a psychological horror in that sense as well, then, you know, Alien is very effective overall. And I think that, you know, when you bring up Jaws and Alien, it really distinguishes, you know, it comes back to something that, you know, obviously our main project here, and that's looking at different directors and their different directing styles. And when you look at Ridley Scott versus Steven Spielberg, how they treat horror, well, obviously one is doing it this way, and, you know, with a lot of help in the back and stuff like that. But this one is more like Ridley Scott is more of someone who's like very subtle, you know. And I think that I can't pinpoint exactly what other Ridley Scott movies, because my memory is garbage right now, but I feel like a lot of his movies are grounded in a lot more like quieter sequences to create, you know, that atmosphere.
Yeah, Ridley Scott's definitely a lot more subtle. I think with Spielberg, he's always got this sort of whimsiness to himself and builds things around the family unit. And when it came to like Ridley Scott, his movies are a lot more about the individual, and they're often about groups of people. But certainly when it came to like Alien, I mean, it's such a wonderful style piece. I mean, not only do we have like the idea of blue collar space, which was created really by Dan O'Bannon, who originally sort of explored this concept with Dark Star, and we see like space in Ridley Scott's view is just like, it's a job. It's not like Star Trek and going on whimsical missions, or it's not even like Star Wars. It's just like, you know, you go to space. It's a job. You're just a blue collar slob. And then we go on the Alien side, and it's all the H.R. Giger stuff, and like all the Alien designs and stuff is all his sort of like weird surrealist sort of like drawings that they put into it. So I think that's where it always sort of stood out. It's always very otherworldly, whereas Jaws could very much happen. Jaws is the reason I still don't like swimming in the ocean. I know it's a plastic shark, but I still don't like swimming in the ocean because of that movie. It's weird how certain things mess you up as a kid.
I mean, I have issues like with after I watch like Jaws and a lot of shark movies. I have issues with like swimming on the deep side of the pool. So, you know, when I was younger, so that's you know, anything which is like deep enough that it gets dark at the bottom,
that's always,
you start questioning what's in there.
Yeah, it's the darkness, isn't it, that worries you.
Yeah, and then you add in the factor of, you know, alligator, then you're like, you know, anything can happen, even if it's a pool.
Okay, so what's your next pick, Kim?
My next pick is a much more recent movie. It's 2020's The Invisible Man, which, in my opinion, is, at least from movies that I've seen, which might be because I'm lowering on horror movies lately, one of the more effective, scary movies that I've seen in the recent years. And the scene that I picked for Invisible Man, well, in case you don't know what Invisible Man is, let's go back. Let's backtrack. This is directed by Lee Wannell, directed and written by him, and it's obviously inspired by the novel of the same name by H.G. Wells. And it's about a woman who believes that she is being stalked by her deceased ex-boyfriend. Where he and that because he's figured out a way to be invisible. So figure that out by yourself. Do you believe that she's being stalked? And is he able to be invisible, right? But the scene that I picked from this, there is actually two scenes that I kind of struggled between. There is one obvious one I think a lot of people go to is the restaurant scene where basically the knife flies around and then cuts her sister in the throat. And that's a very scary scene, but I think the more effective one is when she's in the house, and this invisible, force is just messing with her in many, many different ways. And eventually, as she follows the stuff while she's alone at home at this house, she goes up to the attic following like the phone call. I think it was a phone ring and stuff like that. And she goes there and she finds like the keys and all that stuff. And then eventually when she looks back, she started suddenly like pours the paint over in the space after building all this tension in the darkness. Me and darkness, right? And you just like, and then she pours the paint at the entrance of the attic, and then the paint covers the image of a head that's just there staring at her to kind of, justify that there is an invisible man that is stalking her. And I think that this scene is just, like the shock value of it and the tension building of it is really, really great.
Yeah, The Invisible Man by Lee Wannell. Who'd have thought that one of the co-creators of Saw would give us one of the most imaginative remakes of The Invisible Man concept really since Hollow Man, which is a Verhoeven movie. I really enjoyed The Invisible Man. I thought it was an absolutely fantastic movie and another great movie put out by Blumhouse. But no, he does a really fantastic job updating the material, and the teasers of The Invisible Man being there. There's some real nice subtle little sequences, such as there's a scene where she's outside and you can see his breath. But they don't acknowledge it, and they think, God, a lesser director would have like really played up on this. It's all like, oh, you've given this hint that he's there. I've got to show him now. But Lee Wannell really teases out the existence of this world's Invisible Man, and I'm not going to spoil the actual magic trick of how he is invisible in this version. But
yeah, obviously.
I think that the ending of the sequence, because as you said already, she's pitch black. She's in this attic, and she finds his. She's essentially stumbled onto his little lair, which whenever you stumble onto a killer's lair, normally it means bad things because it means they're going to turn up behind you. And in this sequence where she's like finds the phone, and she finds the knife and this little book of notes, that we get a little hint of what the trick is. And then, as you said, she goes to leave the attic and senses he's there and throws the paint down, and we see his outline in paint. And it's a wonderful, wonderful film, and I think it does some great things with the material. And I really couldn't fault this movie at all. I think it was just great from start to finish. It didn't do it just took it in some really imaginative directions, and I think much like it sort of like really made a lot of sense the way that they had this character. It's sort of like, what would you do if like your abusive ex is now able to turn himself invisible? It's sort of like, that's like, it's scary enough, like the fact of you escape from your abusive ex, and then the worst thing is if you think that he can turn himself invisible so he could be anywhere. There's like, how do you stop that? It's just great.
Yeah, like that's extreme like obsessive behavior, right? And like I think that's the thing is like, when you look at this film, it's treated with so much, like those subtle sequences, like that breath in the air type of thing, and there are so many little moments where you have these things where the audience sees it but the character doesn't. And I think that that's what makes it so brilliant, in the sense that you always feel like they create this feeling where there's always someone around observing you. And there are so many scenes. Like, I had a hard time picking what scene to choose, because there's obviously, there's the one that's in the trailer, where she's in the bathroom, and that's not a secret. If you watch the trailer, you know what I'm talking about. It's a very, like, normal type of scene for a horror movie. But at the same time, when you look at something like this, I think the scene is so nice. But I think, like, for many people, you might not pick this scene. There's, like, many other scenes where, around the house, the Invisible Man is doing a lot of damage to her life and isolating her in that sense. So it goes to many extremes, but at the same time, I think that there's so much here, and this scene for me was one of the most powerful.
Yeah, great pick. Now on to something completely different. We have the sleeping bag death from Friday the 13th, Part 7. Sleeping bags have been a reoccurring joke within the Friday the 13th franchise. It was a fun death in Part 7, where this is the film after Jason's come back as a zombie, because remembering he dies in Part 4. Part 5 he's on vacation, and Part 6 he comes back as a zombie who's magically brought back to life by lightning, which is still one of the less plausible ways that bad guys come back. But Part 7 he was played by Kane Hodder, the man, the myth, the legend. And this particular scene, he sneaks up on the usual amorous couple, and the girlfriend who's in the sleeping bag he beats against a tree. It's comical, but it's super effective at the same time. And apparently a kill that they love so much that they've brought it back a couple of times. They reworked it in the Friday the 13th remake, which has him hoist it above a bonfire and set it on fire, which is pretty grisly. And then in Jason X, as in Jason Goes to Space, they have a comedic holodeck sequence where he basically beats up two nubile young counselors who their characters basically play up the tropes of every slasher victim in a 70s and 80s horror. It's sort of like, oh, we've just been doing drugs, now let's have premarital sex. And then we cut back to him, and he's just beating one sleeping bag victim on top of the other. So it's a scene that if Friday the 13th fans constantly talk about, and I think it would be, if we were to sort of like highlight one of the many great kills within the Friday the 13th series, then I think the sleeping bag death has to be the one.
I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember Part 7 that well, because I watched it during a Halloween marathon, and after a sequence of so many Friday the 13th
they blend one into
movies,
the other after a while, don't they?
They kind of blend together.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, like, looking back at the scene, the sleeping bag scene, I always found like you said, it was very comical, and to me it wasn't very scary, but I can understand, like, I mean, if you are into camping, which I'm not, then that scene would be horrific. Like, I can understand where that's coming from. Like, to me, I think that the scene itself is like, the way they use the sleeping bag scenes are clever, because not a lot of people use that. Like, yeah, sure, you have usually, if the danger is happening, it's like the tent. And not like, picking up the entire sleeping bag and it's like on the tree, like it is very, like, shocking to see a scene like that being constructed.
Yeah, there's obviously scenes that are in the first film that I could have used this list, such as like the Kevin Bacon arrow through the neck, which I still have no idea how they do it. It's all like, it's enough to put an arrow through a fake neck, but this thing's twisting. And I've seen Tom to me like talk through, so like, oh, we did this and this, and it's like, I have still no idea how you did this. You are a wizard of gore, my friend. So, and Tom Savini also gave away his recipe on In Search of Darkness 2 for how many drops of green you got to put in your blood to make it appear right on white shirts. That's like giving away the nuclear missile codes, man. But yes, I know it's not particularly a scary sequence. It's more comedic, but I think if we were to sort of highlight one of the many kills of Friday the 13th, which I think this will be the one, even though there's a really great axe to the head sequence in Friday the 13th Part 1 as well, yeah. I know it's not scary as such, but the sleeping bag death in Friday the 13th Part 7 deserves a place on my list nevertheless. Kim, what you got for us now?
Well, this is the last pick.
It is.
Yes. The last pick goes to a movie that I think is a movie that I think from start to finish builds up on the tension incredibly well. And that is also 2016. Apparently, that's my year in horror.
That's a very good year.
2016's The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Which is a supernatural horror directed by, it's the first English language film by Norwegian director Andre Ovredal. I'm probably butchering it, but I think that's how you say his name. I don't know. And it basically is about a father-son coroner who are examining this body of an unidentified woman, hence Jane Doe. And they start experiencing supernatural things around them. There are many scenes in Jane Doe, and I think that a lot of people will find the ending being one of the more scary moments, because, they start witnessing a lot of things, especially when you're in a morgue. There's a lot of dead bodies that you could reanimate and that sort of thing. And there is one scene that is very clever where, there's a corpse walking towards them as they're trying to get out and escape, which, turns out to, be something else. But it is a very scary, intense scene. But for me, I think that this film does the best is during the process of the whole autopsy. Where as they're examining this body, the camera constantly pans back to this still face of the Jane Doe. And as they're opening her, you keep seeing that face. And like most films, you would expect at one point, this face is going to, move. Something's gonna happen. And yet, the more you think about it and it doesn't happen, the more the tension builds. And that's what's basically so scary, because the horror builds because as they open her up, there's things that they discover about this body, the secrets, the little things that, they notice in the different body parts and stuff like that. So there's a lot of gore in this scene. At the same time, you also add that into the tension of, expecting and anticipating something's going to happen, which, doesn't really happen until later on in another form. And the scene is just, I think it's just so cleverly constructed. I mean, there are some issues with, the film in general. So there are little things that are, but overall, I think it's such a smart idea to do this because, like, there's so much story to this Jane Doe, and like I don't want to reveal it here because I feel like it's a movie that really deserves to be seen if it's not seen before, and if you've seen it, you probably know what I'm talking about. So so that's why it makes the top of my list, because I remember when I watched this, I was literally at the edge of my seat, and I was like, oh my god, this is like supernatural things get me in the first place, and then you're having this whole like autopsy where they're discovering this stuff, and then you keep expecting this corpse to move and it's not, and it's just like it's a real psychological like trigger for me.
It's another film I've never seen, although I watched the clip that you sent me through and I was very hooked on this one, so I'm gonna add this to the list because I'm currently in the midst of a double month of horror movie watching, so it'd be good to catch up on this one as well. Also features Brian Cox, who I'm a huge fan of, the original Hannibal Lecter from back in Manhunter. I would argue that his performance as Lecter is definitely one of the best performances up there of the three. It stands up there with Hopkins and certainly Mads Mikkelsen's portrayal on the the TV show as well. So the only bad portrayal of Hannibal we've seen is the one in Young Hannibal. So
Yeah.
that was awful. That movie was, but no, I really loved this sequence. Just when they're dissecting the body, as you said, you constantly think that the face is going to move or do something, and these little bits of information that they're giving, these little clues that they're finding as they continue this autopsy, I think was just really sort of fascinating, and it plays against your expectations so well. And the fact that it's a two-person piece, it's just this back and forth that you have between them. There's no sort of like filler or wasted dialogue there. It's all very about building the mystery of this girl that they got on the table. So yes, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what you think about it as a whole.
Yeah,
not
just
the scene.
one scene. Cool. To finish out my list, we have a scene which I still am not a huge fan of, and every time I rewatch this movie, my finger sort of hangs around the skip button, and that's the bug pit from Peter Jackson's King Kong. This sequence is horrible in every which way. The basic setup is that our adventurers have been knocked into a pit by Kong while they were trying to escape him, and now they find out that Skull Island is not just a home to a giant ape, but also giant insects and other horrible things as well. I like Peter Jackson's version of King Kong. I think it really plays up the adventure element. So it essentially feels like two movies in one. You've got the island adventure, and then you've obviously got the giant ape on the rampage, which forms the second half there. And I think that it's just such a work of love and talent that he brings to this project. And certainly the bug pit sequence is just this sequence in prolonged horror, as we see that when you have members of this crew are trying to crawl out the pit, they're getting attacked by unseen bugs, and then we got bugs that are just crawling out of everywhere, and then we have the horrible maggot things that consume Andy Serkis, and it becomes a whole other kind of nightmare fuel. So yes, the bug pit sequence, and he actually, being such the nerd he is, recreated the missing sequence from the original King Kong using film techniques of the time as well, which you can check out on the special edition DVD or check it out on YouTube. But yeah, of everything I love about that movie, the bug pit is certainly not it.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen this King Kong, but I did see the scene that you sent over, the little clip that you sent over, and oh my goodness. I think it's just the insects itself, right, that really create the horrific element of like these bugs trying to eat you alive. And you know, when you get to those worms eating that character, it was just really, really like gnarly, you know. Yeah, no, it was like from the bug design to everything, you know. The bug design reminded me a bit of a creature feature that we looked at before.
Deep Rising.
Yes, Deep Rising, and I mean, it was just very, very cringy. Like I get the little bugs all over you and stuff like that, but those looked a little bit more fake to me. But that whole those wormy things, oof. That toothy and wormy. Oh, that was some gnarly scene.
No, if you've got a spare 3 hours, then definitely go and check out Peter Jackson's King Kong. I know it's a little more difficult since you got a newborn, but maybe he'll like King Kong. Get him hooked on the kaiju path early. You're never too young to start watching giant monster movies. And then you can blame it on me. So yes, that's our list. Before we obviously wrap up tonight's episode, it's time to ask the also rans. Was there anything on your list that you wish you'd included at all, Kim?
I mean, I had a few contenders, obviously, that I eventually left off, mostly because I think they're also a little bit more popular. And I feel like a lot of people already know about it. So for me, it's Insidious, where you have the dancing boy scene. I think that whole setup of the scene is really brilliant. Mostly because I think creepy kids in movies are really effective, more than the whole like red face popping up from behind the head. That scene, that was more of a jump scare. Like, I tried to really avoid jump scares, because when you talk about jump scares in horror movies, yeah, some of them build really well atmospherically, but at the same time, like, sometimes those things don't have that lasting effect as much. Much like that was one of the reasons why I left off Descent as well, where you have that jump, the first encounter with the albino creatures in Descent, and that was also Descent was one of those movies that I thought was very scary the first time I watched it, but as you watch it again, it kind of like the horror element, surprise element kind of lowers a little bit more. I feel like the claustrophobia is more scary than the actual creatures themselves.
I like the Descent 2 a lot more than Descent 1. And I think it's mainly because you know what you're essentially going into. The monsters are there. And with the Descent, it's so much of it is like a disaster movie. You're sort of like watching these girls trying to find the way out of a cave system, only to sort of stumble across the monsters. And that introduction is really great. It just catches you off guard. They're just like doing the pan across. It's like, oh, wait a minute. What the hell's that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a great pick there.
Yeah, I mean, I had a few, like I considered Train to Busan, which had, like the whole train station scene with the zombies, and, they're breaking out of the glass and falling onto the train outside and stuff like that. And that's a really, like, I feel like a lot of people talk about, all the zombies running by and then the little girl standing there. And that's also very scary, because obviously you have the endangered child moment. But I don't know, something about the whole pressing against the glass and breaking it, I find that that's very, very nerve-wracking. I have like an indie Irish horror, like The Hallow, which had a really effective scene with the fairies and the needle finger going to the eye, which is very cringy. And then, there's also Absentia, which is the directorial debut, I would say, of Mike Flanagan. And it was one of the movies that I still carry very high regard for, mostly because I feel that, I couldn't pinpoint an actual moment, because the movie is still is getting a little blurry in my mind. I watched it many years ago. But one of the things that I carry real high regard here is that he uses, the low budget that he has to create a creature that you never see. And that creature ends up being just, shadows and sounds and whatnot. And they end up creating these really, really creepy, tingly, skin-crawling moments type of thing. And it works really well, but I just, it would have been a serious contender here if I could pinpoint a scene that I really thought was, that I could choose. Yeah. But I really couldn't pinpoint something that I thought was, one was scarier than the other,
Nice.
How about you? Do you have
I've got a few bits and pieces here. First off, from Deep Rising, the woman getting sucked down the toilet.
Ooh.
It's a great kill, whatever way you want to put it. So it's probably up there. It's probably could be put in the same list as that Friday the 13th Part 7 sleeping bags inclusion on this list. So the Pale Man Chamber from Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh yes, that's a really great pick.
Again, it's one of those most infuriating sequences of like, go in the room, don't touch anything, and she eats a grape. I still remember showing that to my dad, and him just watching someone have the same reaction that you have to a sequence, especially when you see the fairy get eaten. It's sort of like, oh my god, you're just gripping the sofa as you watch it, and it's like so intense. From Tale of Two Sisters, the ghost sequence where the ghost girl jumps up on the bed. There's something about that movement which is just super creepy. It's kind of like in Salem's Lot when you see the flying vampire boy outside the window, the way he hovers. There's something very very key to the movement of that character that just always sort of stuck with me, and also keeping on the Asian track to sort of round things off, is the much talked about finale of Audition.
Okay.
I think that it comes straight out of this scene where you have this hallucination, and then we're just sort of like straight into this sequence where suddenly he's like unconscious on the floor and he realizes he can't move, and his girlfriend is showing her true colors. And then finally on my list is The End of the Ring, because the first time I watched that I almost crawled up the wall. It's been, I think everyone knows what it is now, but the first time I saw the original Japanese version of The Ring, and that ending comes, and you see Starku's ghost, and it just keeps coming closer and closer, and then it like comes through the screen, and it's sort of like just I could not crawl up the wall fast enough to get away from this thing. So yeah, that would be the rounded out of my list. But again, we could do this on another day, and I may have like 5 completely different picks for you. So, but
probably
that's where my mind was when I put this list together. But I'm standing by my main 5. I think they're all really great. They're all really great, and Kim's given me plenty to watch as well. So,
isn't that why these drafts exist?
It's what
right?
you want. You wouldn't, if someone does a draft properly, it should make you discover things, not just tell you things you know already. There's nothing worse than someone playing a draft safe, so like putting out a bunch of old favourites. That brings us to the end of tonight's show. Thank you as always for listening. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us. Leave us a review and let us know what you think of the show. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so come say hi to us there. And you can also check out our blog, which is moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, which has got our complete archive of episodes from Paul W. Sanderson to Ang Lee to Sofia Coppola and Guillermo del Toro, and including our special seasons where we've done the season of Kick-Ass Female Directors, and our upcoming season where we're going to be looking at the history of the creature feature. So hopefully you can join us for that as well. But until next time, thank you to my cousin Kim, and wishing you all a very happy Halloween, and until next time, good night.